The ship of Theseus. An interesting thought experiment, to say the least. Originating from ancient Greece and first mentioned by the historian Plutarch in his work Life of Theseus, the story goes as follows. Theseus, the legendary hero, returned to Athens on a ship after defeating the Minotaur in Crete. This ship was then treasured by the Athenians and preserved as a symbol of their heritage and Theseus's heroism. Over time, as the wooden planks of the ship began to decay, the Athenians replaced them one by one to maintain the ship's integrity. Eventually, after many years, every single plank of wood had been replaced. Plutarch writes, "Now, the 30-oared ship in which Theseus sailed with the youths and came back safe was kept by the Athenians up to the time of Demetrius Phalereus. They constantly removed the decayed part of her timbers and renewed them with sound wood so that the ship became an illustration to philosophers of the doctrine of change and growth, as some argued that it remained the same, and others that it did not." And so, the question that arises, if all the original components of the ship have been replaced, is it still the same ship of Theseus, or has it become an entirely new vessel? To complicate matters, Thomas Hobbes expanded on this thought experiment, and he did this by telling us to imagine that someone collected all the original planks that were replaced, reassembled them into a ship, and then claimed that this reassembled ship was the true ship of Theseus. Now we have two ships, each with a claim to being the original. Which one, if any, is the real ship of Theseus? The ship of Theseus presents a metaphysical puzzle about identity over time. Philosophers use this thought experiment to explore the conditions under which an object remains the same despite changes to its parts. And there are, broadly speaking, two competing intuitions at play here. Continuity intuition and the original material intuition. The ship that underwent gradual replacement seems to be the same ship because its change was gradual and uninterrupted. The process of replacement was seamless, so much that the ship's role, appearance, and connection to its past remained intact in the minds of those who used and maintained it. This intuition ties identity to a sense of connected history and practical continuity, rather than the physical components themselves. Now, on the other hand, the ship reconstructed from the original planks seems like the real ship of Theseus, because it retains the same physical components that defined the original ship. These competing intuitions highlight a tension in how we think about identity. Is identity tied to continuity and function, or the persistence of original material? Okay, so to address this puzzle, philosophers have developed several theories of identity. Let's briefly examine some of these. First of all, mereological comes from the Greek word meros, which simply means part, and so naturally this theory focuses on parts and their relations to a whole. According to the mereological theory of identity, an object is defined by the sum of its parts. If all the parts of an object are replaced, then the object is no longer the same. And if we apply this to the ship of Theseus scenario, this theory would suggest that the ship with all the new planks is not the original. Instead, the reassembled ship made from the old ones is the true ship of Theseus. Then there is four-dimensionalism. This is a theory that is heavily influenced by the philosophy of time, and it posits that objects are not static or fixed entities. Instead, they are four-dimensional entities that extend across time. Imagine a timeline that captures objects in their past, present, and future states. Applying this to the ship of Theseus, it suggests that the gradually replaced ship and the reassembled one are simply different temporal stages of the same overarching entity. So imagine two dots on the timeline of the same object. Finally, we have functionalism. And this perspective, or theory, shifts the focus from material continuity to functional continuity. Under this theory, as long as the ship continues to fulfill its role and purpose, that is, to sail, to be recognized as Theseus' ship by the Athenians, it remains the same ship, even if its materials are replaced. And so this view aligns closely with how we think of identity in practical terms, such as the identity of institutions, of universities or brands, think Gucci. Although the ship of Theseus may seem like an abstract puzzle, it has its relevance to contemporary issues. However, I'd like to bring up a specific example, which is close to us all. The thought experiment mirrors the way our bodies and minds evolve over time. Consider this. Every cell in the human body regenerates over a span of years, and our memories and experiences shape who we are. Are you the same person you were a decade ago? Philosophers like John Locke argue that continuity of memory and consciousness, that is, our psychological connectedness, does indeed ground personal identity. But at the same time, it raises serious challenges. For example, if someone were to gradually lose their memory due to illness, at what point, if any, does their identity change or disappear? Is it tied to their body, their personality, or something more abstract like their role in the world? The ship of Theseus provides a lens for exploring these kinds of questions. I'd say it encourages us to reflect on the stability or fragility of what we call the self. So, what can we conclude about the ship of Theseus? The paradox doesn't really have a definitive answer, and that is precisely its value. It forces us to confront the ambiguity of identity, and it challenges us to refine our concepts. This is a clear example of a really good thought experiment. So rather than offering a solution, the thought experiment opens up new avenues for inquiry. As we wrap up, I'd like to leave you with this question. Does the persistence of identity depend more on the continuity of material, function, or something else entirely? The answer may very well depend on the context and ultimately on how we choose to define identity. Thank you for watching. See you next time.